Hello and welcome to the Colts Blue Zone podcast. I'm Matt Adams in for Dave Griffiths. He's on the road this week for the Indiana Pacers, who are a win away from the NBA Finals, which is pretty amazing. And joining me, as always, Mike Chappell, writer for Fox59.com, CBS4Indy.com. And we got, without Dave, I feel rudderless, Mike. You think we'll be able to do this?
You're the master. You can make things, work over there. Yeah, we'll be fine. We'll miss Dave. He always gives us direction.
Yes.
Whenever we start to go down a rabbit hole, sometimes he goes with us, but a lot of times
he pulls us back.
Right.
Or he brings it back around somehow. Right. And we're not quite as good at that. But
and we were joking off air. If the Pacers lose tonight, Dave Griffiths can no longer go on the road with local
all
teams.
Road trips canceled indefinitely for Dave. But I do want to say it's amazing to me that the Pacers are a win away from the conference finals. I cannot see them losing the next 3 games and not getting there, but I would like to see them close it out in Game 5. By the time you listen to this podcast, you'll know one way or the other. But as we record, that is something that is getting ready to happen here in a few hours.
Also, again, this is not a rabbit hole, whatever, but I've had people argue the value of professional franchises and what the public has to do to help subsidize it, including people in the community who don't care about sports. And all I would argue is that when you have a team that's successful, go back to the 2000s with Peyton and those guys, and even with Luck, and now with the Pacers, it's just different. It's just there's a bounce in people's steps, but more than that, it's the value of your community, the quality of life. And I've talked to the David Fricks and people who know what they're talking about and what it does to the recruitment of people to the city, surgeons and symphony people and all of that. It's amazing. CEOs. So I understand a lot of people don't want to underwrite these projects or these billionaires, but I'm telling you, folks, there's a value. There is, and just sort of sit back and enjoy it because it is a fun ride when it happens.
Well, and that we're actually going to be able to turn that around a little bit, because one thing we're going to talk about is for a considerable portion of the podcast here is Jim Irsay. And he passed away last week, age 65. Came as a shock to me. I think I don't know, was that a surprise to you, Mike, kind of the timing of everything?
The timing, I guess. I have known he's not been doing well. He had been on the West Coast a few months working on his physical rehab to get his mobility back, but I just knew that he was not doing as well as everyone had hoped. And yes, it's always a surprise when you get the news. It just is. It's even though you know that at some point, I think his body, doggone it, just sort of wore down and it said, "Hey, I've had enough." And he was optimistic till the end, but there's always a shock when it does happen.
And he had such an impact. And the reason I said we bring that back around is because you talked about Peyton in the 2000s and the Colts. And, would we have Lucas Oil Stadium if they had not drafted Peyton Manning? And Jim Irsay was a big part of some of the urban renewal downtown Indianapolis and bringing businesses to the downtown area. And just the amount of impact that, and again, I know he's a billionaire and they've invested well and they've done a lot of stuff, and he's got his music collection, all that things, but he has done just so much for the Colts as an organization. He's done so much for the state of Indiana and the city of Indianapolis. Again, at 65 years old, you still felt like he had more to give, and I think Jim probably did too.
Yeah, and that's what people, again, need to realize is back pre-Manning, there was talk about this team moving. There was, and it was serious talk, maybe more so in the league. I think the one thing that Jim Irsay was committed to was Indianapolis. I think that he told me many times that he learned from his dad what not to do, how not to do things. And when he got here, the youngest GM and then the youngest owner, he was committed to making it work here. And I'm telling you, though, if it's, I always go back the history of the Colts in Indy Bill Polian's first round picks, were Peyton and Edgerrin. What if it had been Ryan Leaf and Ricky Williams?
My goodness.
Well, I mean, I know. And if that happens, does business simply force him to move the team as much as he didn't want to? But all that they've done, and I'm not discounting the Pacers at all. I mean, how they've stayed here through the Slick and Nancy Leonard's incredible commitment shouldn't be overlooked. But the NFL, I'm sorry, the NFL makes you just different. It lifts you a notch higher. The convention center, the growth. Talk to the Visit Indy people, Chris Gall and those guys. And Indy is a destination for conventions. Sort of the NFL Combine's a convention, if you want to go there. But their calendar is full, and I think a lot of that goes to the Colts and what Jim Irsay did. His commitment, it worked out. Yes, the community has helped that, but just the vibe you get downtown, even when the team's not doing well. Right now, they're sort of stuck in no man's land. Not good enough, and not just terrible, but there's still a vibe. There just is, and there's anticipation, and I hope people can appreciate Jim Irsay. And again, disclaimer: I got to know him from the day they got here. I can still remember sitting in a dorm room up at Anderson College. I think at the time it was Anderson College in '84. It was his office, and we met and talked, and just sort of things just took off from there. And he was a good friend. It was awkward because here I am covering the team at the time for the Star, and now for Harris at Fox and CBS. And it was awkward at times because he's a friend, a good friend, and sometimes he did dumb things. And I'm not talking the off the field. So I'm talking moves and decisions,
front office stuff,
and you have to be critical. And the one thing I really appreciated about Jim Irsay, unlike a lot of owners, is when you criticized him, he didn't take it personal. I think as long as you were fair and had a point, he always said that talk good about us, talk bad about us, but just talk about us. Because he knows, like any owner, when you lose the fan base and when you lose the media, you're done.
Apathy is the worst thing you can have for a sports franchise.
It takes a while to get there, and it takes so long to get the fan base back. So we talked to for the first time since Jim's passing. We talked to players, Shane Steichen yesterday, and then we talked to Reggie Wayne, and he started with the Colts in 2001. So he has as much depth and knowledge and relationship with Jim Irsay as almost anybody in the building, except for a few people, obviously. But people on the outside need to understand. They've seen the things Irsay does, throwing footballs to the fans or building a YMCA or kicking a stigma. But his relationship with players, I almost would say, is unmatched in the league. Eddie DeBartolo back in the day with the Niners was like that. But the players understood that he had their back. Story after story. DeForest Buckner told us that last year when he had the high ankle sprain, he wanted to go to Panama to get stem cells.
He flew to Panama.
He flew to Panama. Kenny Moore told us there was a death in the family several years ago during game week, and the Irsays made it possible for him to go to the funeral, maybe like on a one-day trip, so he's still there for the game. I talked to I'm finishing up my story on Wednesday night, and I'm tired. I want to watch the end of the Pacer game. And Peyton Manning calls. And I don't mean to name drop, but that he calls me.
He's an important guy.
And he's talking, and he said, yeah, he said, I just want to tell you, because people had to have the impression that he and Irsay were on the outs after Jimmy released him in 2012. And I think the friendship isn't like what it once was. But he said, I'm grateful he gave me my first start. Our relationship was great. He said he would do whatever you needed to have done. And he talked about Irsay made his jet available to fly he and Ashley to Mexico for their honeymoon and then flew him back. And he said he flew Peyton and Marshall to Canton last year for Dwight Freeney's induction. I don't think it was for Peyton's induction in 2021. Maybe it was. But Irsay wanted Peyton to enter Canton in a Colts jet and not a Denver jet. So, and he told me a few other things, but it just, people have to understand where Reggie Wayne says is that it's like losing a family member. And he said, I felt like I was the son that Jimmy never had. He said he and Edgerrin were talking and they both felt that way. And I've always told people that if you want to know the solidarity of relationships that Irsay had with his players, 3 players have chosen Jim Irsay to present them at the Hall of Fame. You know, not your high school coach, not your dad, not your son, the owner of your team. You know, Marvin, Edgerrin, and Freeney. That's just rare. And I don't know what Reggie will do if and when he gets in, but they all spoke from the heart. And if you have a chance to see Reggie's clip, 90 seconds, you know, we requested Reggie. We weren't supposed to get him, and I sort of asked Matt Conti, I said, hey, can we get Reggie because of all we've talked about? And Reggie was pretty good for about 3 minutes. He just talked and this, that, and the other. And then our own Lara Overton, formerly with Fox, she asked him about what would you like these players to understand about Jim Irsay? Many of these players don't know him. It's a young team, and because of his health issues, Jimmy's wasn't around the team for the last 2.5 years, whatever it's been. And if you can see the clip, Reggie, it took him 30 seconds to get himself composed, wiping tears from his eyes, and he told his receivers, y'all don't know him. This guy would do anything for you, give you the coat, the clothes off his back. That's what players understand about Jim Irsay, and I've always said that, again, he was 180 degrees opposite of his dad. Bob Irsay knew just enough about football to be dangerous, and he meddled when he shouldn't have. And Jim Irsay hasn't done that. 2022 was a year you're like a mulligan on.
Yeah.
But by and large, as he told me early when he was an owner, is the idea is to put people in place and let them do their job. He did that with Bill Polian. At times when Bill Polian pushed his tolerance level to the nth degree with the owner, and that's what he's done. With Chris Ballard, these guys, is put people in place and let them do their jobs, and stepping in only when it's really necessary. And there have been a few times that the owner, Bill Polian, wanted to do something, and Jimmy said, we're not going to do that. A couple of times. But he's the one that drove the drafting of Peyton Manning. It was. They were all at the end in alignment. He was the one that drove for Andrew Luck. He just did. So the legacy is deep in what he's done around town and what we know about, what we don't know about. But again, everything is not quite the way it was because he's not here. And I just hope people realize the depth of the loss of what this guy will be, or what we'll miss from him not being here.
I was not surprised to hear some emotion from Reggie, but still, it got to you.
Sure.
Especially if you're a longtime Colts fan. You got Reggie Wayne, one of the icons of the franchise, talking about another icon of the franchise in Mr. Irsay, and passing away and how much he had meant to him. And of course, then he also told a funny story about how, it came down to his last contract. He was going to go out to Kansas City. Irsay called him. He's like, what took you so long? And he's like, well, I had to finish my favorite TV sitcom or something like that. And they agreed on a deal, $17.5 or $17 million somewhere along there. And then Irsay said something along the lines, hey, if you would have asked for $30 million, I'd have given you $30 million. And Reggie was just like, doggone it. Why didn't I ask for 30?
Right. So, but that was one of the few times, again, it happened with T.Y. Hilton, where I think the Colts had a number they wanted.
Right.
And they got to that number, and it wasn't enough for either Reggie or for T.Y. And then the owner stepped in and said, "No, we're gonna make.
We
want
to keep this guy.
He did that. He did that with Adam Vinatieri. and probably with Pat McAfee is get to a point, and then the owner says, "No, we're going to do this." And one of Jim Irsay's faults, I would think, is fair to say, is he overpaid because he wanted to do whatever it took to bring the right people in here. In my head, I can think of 6 or 7 players good players, but they were overpaid because the owner valued them that much. But then at the same time, he knew when business was business. Peyton Manning in 2012.
Such a tough call, man. Such a tough call.
It was, but from a business point, it wasn't.
Right, exactly.
Peyton couldn't throw he couldn't throw a Nerf ball 30 feet. And he's due a $28 million roster bonus in like a week or 2 weeks. So there was no way. And oh, by the way, you've got Andrew Luck sitting there. So that made sense. Go back to 2005. And they come oh so close to doing something in the playoffs. They get beat, and Edgerrin James is a free agent. I think they had franchised him the year before, but he's a free agent, and they let him go. And he went and signed a pretty good deal with Arizona, and because it was business, and it's a little different with a running back and a quarterback, right. but Edge understood it was business. And that didn't impact their relationship at all. Remember, Jim Irsay gave Edgerrin a Super Bowl ring.
Right, because they wouldn't have been there without.
Right, because he helped them get to the doorstep. So, and I've been around Edge enough to hear him talk about the boss, Jim. And it was genuine. And I'm sure there's a few players that wouldn't have all these things to say, but the vast majority really do. Ryan Kelly, when they went through their family tragedy, the Irsay family was there, and it was all about Jim. But the daughters were in lockstep with all of this.
Well, again, not probably as hands in on the day-to-day operations as he had been, but even with the organization just kind of typifying what Irsay kind of believed with how they dealt with the Braden Smith situation. Trying to make sure that he felt like he got the resources that he needed because, they started kicking the stigma, but if they just kind of abandoned their player, what would that have meant?
Right.
So there are a lot of good stories from fans that we have seen. The Colts have put a special section on their website at colts.com/Jim Irsay where people can read some of the tributes. If you want to make a tribute out on social media, you can do #ThankYouJimIrsay. So just it's weird because obviously Irsay's been around since the Colts have been here in Indianapolis in '84. This will be the first season that he will not be around. He's been around my entire life.
Right.
And just to think, to me, this is a little bit random, but like Irsay made Twitter fun.
Yes.
When it was fun, it's not fun anymore. But he with the contests and Abby's hat picks and all that stuff, very fond memories of which obscure Colts thing can you remember that might get you tickets to a preseason game. And I actually did get a couple of those. I've got a couple of signed letters from Irsay. I was the Abby's hat pick a couple of times. So. That's my connection because I did not know Mr. Irsay. I'd never talked to him or met him. I only know him because he's the owner of the Colts, and that's the team that I follow. And I followed him on Twitter.
Well, again, they're gonna wear a black patch to signify Jim, to remember Jim. It's there you go. And it's funny they handed out. I've got a lapel pin that's like that.
Oh, they give you a little a
little lapel pin, which is cool to have. And that just shows, again, his initial and his signature and his little smiley face. And again, being the friend that he was, I was at the Star for, 31 years covering the Colts. And in my 30th year, he presented me a Colts jersey with a 30 on it. Now, the problem is that was Laron Landry's number, so I'll look past that.
The Ron Landry jersey.
But he writes a little bit of this, and then Jim Irsay, and then he puts his little smiley face on it.
Yep.
So it's just touches like that he does. And when you scroll through those thank yous that people put in, that's what I'm saying. So we know so much of what he did, spending millions of dollars to try to save a whale. Things like that. But we don't know, and he didn't want us to know about sending $25,000 to someone whose house burned down, or who lost a family member, or who's had a family member battling cancer or whatever. The list would be incredibly long of things that he did. And I don't know if he told his, Pete Ward and the people, don't let this out. We're going to do this. Don't let this out. But, we know of 10% of what he did. And it's the other 90% that's really tells you about the guy, because it's helping someone who's desperately in need of help, whether it's depression, whether it's a family tragedy, whatever. That's why, again, I hope we're past the well, he had problems. Yeah, everybody has problems. Everybody has flaws. His were just exposed on a national basis.
Right, because of who he was.
Right.
Right.
But this is the time to remember who he was. And one of the things that I'm going to post something tomorrow is now, and we've touched on it, but now the baton is passed to the daughters, Carly, Kaylin, and Casey. And it's the ones that have been really, really out there have been Carly on the football side, and Kaylin more in the marketing and
because she's been in charge. Kaylin's been kicking the stigma.
She's been the spear of the kicking the stigma, and they do so much more. And Casey does as well. But Carly's the one that's going to really be the hands-on, directional person of the team. We've got the picture of her with a headset and a play sheet on the sidelines of games. And we talked to players about that. Taekwondo Lewis said, "Yeah, you look over there, and she's got a headset on." I said, "Does she call plays?" He said, "No, she listens."
Could, right?
But he said he has players on the other team come over and says, "Who is that?" And he says, "That's one of our owners." So to a lesser degree, they've done what their father did. He learned. I don't think they're picking up jock straps like their dad did, but they've done so many things to lead up to this. And it sounds wrong when you say they've been preparing for this transition, but they sort of have been. It's sort of like when you're there's a family that owns the neighborhood hardware store.
You got to learn the trade, right?
And yeah, dad's getting older, then the kids start doing more, and they're just learning the trade. And I really think Carly has done more and more over the last 2.5 years, since December of 2023 when Jim had whatever he had, and it's been an uphill battle since then. And she's been there. She's had hands on. Now Jim's always kept in strong input, but Carly's been the one with her hand on the wheel, and I think she's as ready as she can be. We'll see if that's ready enough.
Right.
But it's obvious that the players trust her. I realize they're saying the right things now because she's their boss.
It's the boss.
But I do sense a trust in her from Shane Steichen, from Chris Ballard, to all the players. And because Reggie said, there's times that, she's in meetings, and he said sometimes she'll give you a pop quiz, so you can't be sleeping in meetings. DeForest Buckner told us that during the COVID year, when all the meetings were done on Zoom, he said, we're having our defensive line meeting, and she's on there. So she's tried to learn as much as possible about the football operations. And through all of this, someone who can't be forgotten is Pete Ward, another friend. But he knows how that operation works, the organizational. So they've got the important thing, again, from like what Jim Irsay always said, the important thing is when you're an owner is to put people around you that you trust and know what they're doing. And that's what Carly has, probably the Dan Emersons in council, and Pete Ward and Matt Conti and his PR staff. Those are people who you need to be able to lean on, and I think she will. You can't be a sort of a novice owner, if that's what you want to call the daughters, and not lean on people. You can't believe you know everything, because you don't know everything.
Well, Pete Ward's been around that organization for like ever, right? He goes back to Baltimore,
right,
doesn't he?
Right. And he got to be Jim's right-hand man, did a lot. He was there. When something had to be done, Pete was there. He took care of it. He knows how everything goes. So That's why I say you surround yourself with people, and Jim surrounded himself with Pete. So it's the transitions there. This is number one where they're going to have to sell things and bring in owners who don't know what they're doing. This is a continuation of a family business, a much more profitable hardware store on your corner that they're going to have. But everyone believes it's in the good hands with the daughters.
Well, and sort of from the not to make a grim outlook of it, but Irsay was suspended for a time because of some legal trouble that he ran into. And so they did get he suspended for
6 games, and that's when Ryan Gregson and Carly and the other daughters and
kind of had some on the job training because of that. I mean, it's not a great thing to have to do, but like from an experience standpoint.
Well, again, the last 2 years as well.
Right.
With Jimmy not being healthy enough to do his normal task, they've taken on more.
Because they still play football games. There's still salaries to pay. The team operations still have to go on.
They practiced last week. They're practicing this week because you have to go on. You grieve, but you have to go on.
Jim Irsay will be laid to rest after a private memorial at St. Luke's United Methodist Church. The team announced that yesterday. It'll be on Monday when he'll have his service. And then not a public thing, not something they want fans to turn out to. This will just be for friends and family, and you'll probably see some NFL players and sort of that stuff come to that have been invited. And then they said that a public memorial or a public tribute will be announced at a later date. I can't think of anything better than to do like a Jim Irsay memorial tribute concert or something like that to kick off the season. Who knows what they'll do?
That's what they've been doing the past few years up until this last year. Is they had the Jim Irsay collection and band at Lucas Oil, which was I've been to a couple of them in there, and what was cool is he had a lot of his collection in the halls, and
you could look at it, man. It's awesome.
It is, and whether he could sing or not, I don't know. I'm not a.
One of my coworkers will tell you definitively that he does not think that he sings very well, but you know what? He's got billions of dollars, and he can do whatever he wants, right?
Some billionaires probably do it in the shower, and Jim does it at Lucas Oil Stadium,
right? And he brings in a collection of people who are very talented, and also lets them sing as well.
That's what's cool too. Is I was talking to Stephen Holder and James Boyd and Joel A. We shared messaging and we were just going over the Jim Irsay collection, the guitars and the all the memorabilia, Muhammad Ali's boxing gloves, and he finally got remember Wilson, the volleyball from Castaway?
Yep, from Castaway.
He got that, and
you're kidding me. I didn't know that.
I can't even imagine the value of his collection, and it was important to him, and he wasn't a guy that bought things and then put them in a corner. He took it on tour. And so I hope in some form that can continue. But it just showed it. And what was kind of funny, too, is we're out at practice yesterday on Wednesday. And normally it's rap stuff. And I always joke with guys that, this isn't on my playlist in my car, the songs. Well, yesterday it was like Bob Seger and the Stones.
You recognize the songs for the first time in a long time,
I could sing along if I wanted to. But that was more in Jim Irsay's wheelhouse. And that's where I hope that at some point the younger players, can really appreciate what they had, because he was quirky. He was, but he again, there was a genuineness of him. And again, the older players understand it. Buck and Zaire Franklin and those guys. It's the young guys who need to. I can remember sort of on this is back when, remember Tom Rathman was a running backs coach here, and players in his room probably didn't know who the heck he was, and he was a pretty good player.
Yeah, Rathman was a really good player.
Yeah. So this was like when you bring in young players. In the last couple of years, I'm not sure that Jim's gotten on the phone with them. Maybe I don't know that he has. He hasn't been in the draft room for a couple of years because of his health and immobility.
Because I don't remember. A couple years ago, when they did the draft, he did at least do a phone call with them, and when they did with the next pick this year, I don't remember hearing Irsay doing that,
because he was, as the draft was going on, certainly in the first round, maybe the second, third round, he was hooked up through Zoom or whatever technology they had, but he simply wasn't in the room. So that's where, again, more and more. The last time I think we talked to him in person was at training camp last year. He went to Dwight Freeney's Hall of Fame induction, was, in his wheelchair, I know it bothered him to be in a wheelchair because he was such a guy who wants to be among fans and
I mean,
around
their
and
T-shirts
play
that
golf.
they wore yesterday were of him back in the old weightlifting days.
Right.
That's how he wanted to be, right?
Right. Very, very active and very, physical. So again, that's where I hope these players understand that, and I think they will at some point, because it's kind of like, I think it was either Michael Pittman or Taekwondo Lewis said, he is the horseshoe, and
Yep.
I think it was Pittman said that he is the horseshoe, and he made everyone realize that the horseshoe is about everybody. It's not one person; it includes everybody. So we always used to kind of roll our eyes when they said, "Yeah, we're going to sign horseshoe guys." Well, you sign players.
You sign players, right?
And if they're really, really good players, and you have a tolerance for whatever their flaws are, but they do. When Tony Dungy got here back in 2002, and he had a discussion with Jim Irsay. Maybe this was before he signed him. He said, "I want to bring a championship to this team, Tony, and I want to do it the right way, with the right kind of people." And by and large, they did. By and large, there's always a player or two that you think, it's not exactly a Colt guy. But by and large, they did it the right way, with the right kind of players. Yeah, and yes, elite players. They had more elite players in the 2000s than.
Oh goodness, yes.
I mean, you can go to. I can name 15 guys, and they were elite players. So he did it the right way, and hopefully that has set the foundation moving forward, because what they've got right now is not good enough. It's not. He understood that. It frustrated him to no end. And it was kind of funny the last year or two when we've talked to him, is he was always multiple Lombardis, and we always that's where we roll our eyes.
Yes.
But he had gotten away from that. It was more about, we need to get back to where we're competing, and we're relevant in the AFC South.
Yeah, win the division, get in the playoffs.
And that's the challenge they face. And we've talked long about what needs to be done for that to happen. And I go back to when they made the playoffs in 1995 with Harbaugh. I believe that Bob Irsay had his stroke before that run, so he really didn't appreciate it. He wasn't able to appreciate it. And now, if they can get this thing back to where it belongs, Jim won't be here to appreciate it.
Yeah.
But as Shane Steichen said, they're dedicating the season to him, and it's when you do that, you gotta come through, and
better come through.
You better come through, and don't do a
7-10
Brian Piccolo and Walter Payton, where if you, or Gale Sayers, when you dedicate a game, you're supposed to win it. So, but everything's moving forward as it has to. I was talking to someone out there. I said it's business as usual, and they sort of corrected me. It's not business as usual. Business carries on, but it won't be as it's been. But you have to. Like I said, they're practicing. They've got 2.5 more weeks, whatever it is, of practice, and then they have a lull. Then they go to training camp. So you have to carry on. It'll just be with a few different people in place.
All right, we'll take another look at the patch that the Colts will sport during their season this year with Jim Irsay's initials and, of course, his signature there with the smiley face. You are watching the Colts Blue Zone podcast on Fox 59 Now. Also, thank you for joining the audio version and on YouTube. Well, as you mentioned, Mike, things may not be going on field the way that the Colts want, and even though the work is a little bit different because this will be the first season without Jim Irsay there calling the shots and on the sidelines and all of that, the work still continues. You've got to play football, and we did see some on-field stuff this week, OTAs. First set of first few days, and then they have another set next week, correct? And then there's a mandatory minicamp.
3 practices this week, 3 practices next week, and then the mandatory minicamp will be 3 days, or it's normally been like 2.5.
So they did have a few players who were not out at OTAs practices this week. Jonathan Taylor working out in Florida. We understand Zaire Franklin dealing with that ankle injury. He had surgery on. Jalen Carlisle, the linebacker, with a shoulder injury. And then Drew Ogletree and Josh Downs with the infamous soft tissue issues, keeping them out of OTAs. I also read that Mooney Ward was there,
He
but he
was
wasn't
there.
working out.
We were surprised because it was Jalen Jones and Juju Brents as starting corners. But Ward was there on the sideline, but he had been away dealing with family issues or being with his family.
So he hadn't been like fully integrated into the sets yet.
Just sort of easing him in, and that's what this time's for. One player I didn't notice, and we didn't ask about because it was a busy day, was Samson Ebukam. I didn't see him out there, but he's coming back from the Achilles.
And important to stress that. Well, yes, they want them there and everything. This is technically a voluntary portion of. Now, it's sort of like when I was in high school and we had some voluntary workouts. You'd better show up at the voluntary workouts,
unless you're a Jonathan Taylor. Or I go back to one of my all-time favorite Edgerrin James quotes: "Is remember when he always spent his time in Florida working out,
right?
Because he wanted to." And whenever the Colts were, a lot of times when the Colts were working here, and he said, "I only went to school 2 years, but I know what the term voluntary means."
Absolutely. So there's voluntary. So it's not like a big flashing neon sign that Jonathan Taylor's not there. Now was their second round pick JT Tuimoloau?
Yes.
He was out there,
yes.
And of course. Is he allowed to do all?
They sign waivers or whatever
up until training camp, right?
Right, and in training camp you have to be under contract.
Yeah, so we'll see him still at workouts and stuff like that. Did you get a good look at all at Tyler Warren?
Oh my goodness!
Yesterday,
it's like they're telling the quarterbacks throw to 84. He was you notice him whether it was Anthony Richardson or whether it was Daniel Jones down the field. He just catches the ball. I know that sounds dumb because he's a receiver and all this, but he just catches the ball. And it reminds me, like with Reggie, the one thing that always impressed me with Reggie Wayne is he caught everything with his hands.
Oh yeah, he had great
the ball doesn't get to his body, and that's what I noticed with Tyler Warren. Again, it's a small sample size. We saw a 90-minute practice, and it didn't matter who the ball came from. It was on time. He was making sharp cuts. So one thing I just need to kind of warn people about is this is whatever you read about. I hope you read what we write, but keep in mind that it is OTAs and it's 7-on-7. And if you're a quarterback, doggone it, you ought to complete 90% of your passes 7-on-7.
You should not have anything unless it's a drop.
Right, and we had a AD Mitchell drop yesterday. So, but by and large, the guys were on target. There were a couple that Richardson threw that weren't there, which I think we're going to have to. It's kind of like with Andrew Luck. He would have 2 or 3 like he thought. You wanted to stop the game and say, Andrew, walk me through what you saw while you threw that pass. But early indications are good. There will be absolutely no way that we can judge if we run a running leaderboard on quarterbacks,
right?
Because they're going to alternate these guys. They did yesterday. Anthony Richardson took the first reps with out there in 7-on-7, and then they alternate. You can't if you want to make something up on this guy's doing more, knock yourself out. I think if we do that, we're gonna give the team and Steichen and Chris Ballard reason just laugh at us because we're not going to know. We're not going to know what they're judging when it comes time to who's the starting quarterback. I think we'll see from what we see in practice and training camp. We'll have a good idea who at least has the edge. I'm one of those that believes that Daniel Jones has to knock out the incumbent. He just does. He has to be clearly better. Because of so much that we've talked about, so much of the immediate future is riding on Richardson being the guy. It just does. But again, and we saw some good things from the defense. The one bad play, Richardson tried to throw an out. I couldn't see the receiver. Liam Anderson undercut it, interception, which he's one of the healthy linebackers, because you've got
everybody else
Zaire and Carlisle is not
your
practicing.
Big guys or 2 of your starters. Right. What we assume to be 2 of your starters are out currently.
So again, encouraging, but unfortunately, yesterday with the way it's set up, after we talked to the players, Buck and Kenny Moore and all these guys, it was hard to transition to, okay, how's it going on the field?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was looking for, I usually go and listen to the media availabilities afterwards. And what the Colts did this week was they basically took all of the interviews of the players of the portions where they talked about Jim Irsay and his impact, and they put them into kind of a melt together about 20 minutes. And it's worth watching and worth listening to. But if you're looking for news on how this football team is going to be this year, not going to be a lot of help for that. And that is completely understandable, right?
It was even awkward with Shane Steichen. The first, I don't know, 8-10 questions were about Jim Irsay, and Jim Irsay gave Shane his first head coaching job and all this, and then there was sort of a pause, and like Joel said, well, can we do off topic now? I mean, can we do football stuff now? So it was awkward, and Shane was fine with it, but that's sort of not what yesterday was for. Next week again, we'll get the players in practice on Wednesday, and then that next week, the last week, we get 3 days or however long the third day goes, and that's when we'll talk football, and we'll talk to the quarterbacks at some point. Again, the last 3 days of OTAs is a mandatory minicamp. You're here,
right?
So, and I'm not saying that Jonathan Taylor hasn't been here.
No, I mean we saw him just a couple weeks ago,
right?
So
it's their choice, and it's not like he's down in Florida on the beach. He's when Edgerrin James wasn't there, I went down there one time to do a story when his rehab and his ACL injury, and they worked their butt off down at least at Miami. They did. They worked. So I'm sure Jonathan Taylor's doing the same thing. If he has a bad season or whatever, it won't be because he wasn't prepared. He's done it. He's just missing time with the offense. That's all it was. When Edgerrin wasn't here, they couldn't really maximize his possible work into the pass game just because. But this is nothing to make a big deal about, unless he's not here for anything. Now, if he's not here for mandatory, which there's no reason he won't be, he's under contract.
But then you start to raise an eyebrow about that, right?
But this is just his preference to do his preparation away from the team in Florida.
Well, and I did read a few different accounts because you got to go to the OTA practice, and then I read kind of like Kevin Bowen, our good friend and colleague in the sports media, always does a nice job of charting the completions and all that stuff. But the general sentiment that I got from the OTA work from the quarterbacks yesterday was that Richardson was pretty good intermediate and hit some big plays, which what have we seen him do, right? And then Daniel Jones was a little more underneath and intermediate and not hitting the big plays. And again, I think if you were to kind of describe the two quarterbacks and how you think things would go with that, that's kind of where you would end up. And because that is where their skill sets go. And, maybe they took off a couple of times here and got a run here or there as well. But it does sound like, maybe with Richardson, some of the footwork and the concentration's a little bit better than it has been in the past. But again, it's guys throwing without pads, where there's no contact.
And DBs aren't jostling the guys.
So they're not jamming guys to the line of scrimmage, and they're not pulling the jerseys and trying to get away with all the hand fighting that you usually see out in the field that throws off your timing, disrupts everything. So, you can't read too much into it, but when you do have an open quarterback competition like we've got this year, that is going to be the storyline for the Colts. Even after Shane Steichen names a starter, if that guy struggles for a quarter, then you're going to be asking, when are they going to bring in the other guy? And if that guy struggles, then, hey, is it time for Riley Leonard to see the field? That is just how things work here. So,
well, and that's a situation that they have created by how they've handled Richardson and how he's handled it. This is where they are. And, like I said, is whenever the time comes and Shane says who his starter is, whether it's after the third preseason game, the second one, he'll say he needs to say he's our quarterback for now, because that's you can't go for the foreseeable future like he's tried to do in the past. And like you said, the problem is it's going to be as soon as that guy struggles a game, 2 games, barring injury, of course, it's going to be, well, did you think about pulling this guy in the fourth quarter to give yourself a spark? That's where they are. And the best thing that can happen is for Richardson to grab it, to stay healthy, and be the guy. If after 3 or 4 games he has a bad quarter, he has a bad game, there's not that. What did you think about going to Daniel Jones?
Right.
So, no, he just had a bad game. the worst possible thing is to go back and forth.
Yeah,
and not
yo-yoing that position,
right? But because of their play, and that would just be detrimental to the entire development of the team. They need to have one of these guys be the guy, and there'd be no question going through the schedule that this guy's playing at the proper level, and you're not thinking about in your meetings on Tuesday, hey, do you think we need to make the quarterback switch?
So you're telling me that after an hour and a half of practice watching, you don't know who the quarterback's going to be?
Oh, no, to me, this is leader in the clubhouse is Anthony Richardson, because it has to be, and I have not enough confidence that he'll be the guy.
Right.
He needs to be. He needs to be.
Right, but will he be? Right.
But the small sample size we have, your optimism is based on what?
Right.
I mean, him staying healthy? No. His accuracy? No. So, but it needs to be. I hope the offseason he had works. One thing that I always remember, though, is when you have a quarterback either with bad, ineffective footwork or a hitch in his throw, and they spend the offseason really working on it, that when it comes to game time,
crunch time, those habits come back.
You tend to go back to who you were.
Right.
So always be careful of, hey, I really worked on this. And, when this was back with Andrew Luck and Clyde Christensen, and he took his quarterbacks, or he took Luck or the receivers to some Air Force base out west. And they put them through one of those test simulators to where, you sit there and you're flying and it's just really nice. And then all heck breaks loose. Then how do you respond when there's no script? And how is your decision making, and can you stay on point? And that's what these pilots had to understand, is it's seldom going to be what you thought it was going to be.
Not everything doesn't go as planned.
Right. And in football, it seldom goes. Because maybe the left tackle lets a guy get through, maybe the right tackle lets a guy get through, or maybe the receiver doesn't get off the line right, and all of a sudden there's no timing. So how do you do things? That's what we'll see, and I hope that Richardson has done enough to where when it really comes time to cut bait, that he has the right mechanics to get it done.
And even sometimes when you have the right plan, the other team calls the same defense, but a guy lines up wrong on the defense, and he's not where you expect him to be, and then that turns into a bad play. Like there's so many variables that you cannot control.
One of the biggest plays in franchise history was in the 95 AFC Championship game at Pittsburgh.
Was it the little Mont Warren?
3rd and 1, and they ran the perfect play, and it would have sealed the game with 3 minutes to play. And the DB for Walt Williams, I can't think of his name, Walt Williams or somebody, botched his assignment, and he blitzed when he shouldn't have, and he tripped up Lamont Warren.
Got him just by the shoe.
And if he doesn't do that, Lamont Warren picked up a first down, and the Colts were in the Super Bowl. So you can dial up the right play, and sometimes it just doesn't work.
Doesn't work out. Now, as far as the Colts quarterbacks go for reps yesterday, they and sometimes it'd be like one guy will be the number 1 guy one day, and then the next practice he'll be the number 2 guy. But they basically just split the reps down with first team, even right down the line with both these kids.
Yeah, it looked like to me, and I wasn't quite as attentive as Kevin Bowen because my mind wanders.
But it
looked like that Richardson was going more with the first team, whether he was going first, whatever the rotation.
Okay.
And Jones was more with the second group. But again, it's gonna flip from day to day. It's not going to be, this guy all one day is going to do this, and then the next day it's the next guy. So that's why I say we're going to try to figure out what they're doing and has this guy taken the lead after 3 weeks of training camp or whatever. But they're going to have their own analysis and evaluation and what they're looking for that we might not even consider. But we'll still look at it, and we'll still chart passes, and we'll look stupid.
Well, that's what we do.
That's what we do. We don't need a lot of help looking stupid, but they'll let us help.
Now, we did hear from Shane Steichen that the Colts will have from Steichen we heard the Colts will have
said they were working on something else.
Yeah,
I think that was in Baltimore when they were working on it.
And John Harbaugh was actually the one who revealed that the Colts and Ravens had something cooking ahead of their August 7th preseason game. They'll do a joint practice together, and then the Colts will host the Packers before their August 16th home game home preseason game. And then from what I understand, what I read and what was suggested is that Steichen kind of alluded to the fact there may be another joint practice.
We got the Bengals. Remember last year?
Which would be the Bengals again.
Right.
And now this year, because of the way the schedule works out, the Colts have one home preseason game and the other two are on the road.
Right.
So it would be 2 joint practices with the away teams, and then they would have one here at presumably at Grand Park.
Right.
The way that worked.
And we're talking about, again, in the media room, that there's a chance that the joint work with the Ravens might be one practice.
Might be one instead of 2.
That's how it was with Philly and Cincy last year. And the one here with the Packers might be 2. And there's a very good chance that if you have 2 with the Packers, that preseason game.
You're not going to
now how that's going to be with the quarterback competition, I don't know. But I won't be surprised if they work out something with the Bengals. I had we drove down with Jeffrey Gorman and Matt Taylor and Casey before that, and spent the day down there. It was just a great day. So I think that's possible with the Bengals. I think they get so much work done, so much valued work done, and it's obvious that Chris Ballard likes that.
Yeah, he values them. I mean, the Colts have had a lot of
does as well
since, especially 2018.
Right.
The Colts they've done joint practices going all the way back to like 1997.
Right.
Like one of them was with the Rams when they were still in St. Louis.
Right.
And but over the past few seasons, they have not really ramped it up, but they have consistently done
Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago,
absolutely.
Arizona. We had Marvin Jr.
Last year.
Right.
So obviously the Colts place a lot of value in that. And I do think it is good because, after a while for those guys, they've been with the same guys for several weeks now. They're beating up the same guys on the offensive line. They're beating up the same guys on the defensive line. They're haggling with the same receivers and the same defensive backs. They're seeing the same pass rush. It is good for those teams to have somebody else to go up against. And it's not like they're surrendering secrets of the playbook to each other, but it just gives you another somebody that you can really just go and be competitive across.
But and again, it's important for the coaching staffs of those teams, the Ravens and the Packers and the Colts, to understand this is how we do things. We don't take receivers and running backs to the ground, but we give them a thud.
Are you listening, Nick Cross?
I know. Yeah, really. Leave Josh Downs alone. But you need to have the similar approach so that practices work.
Right.
We had a couple. Was it the Bears and Cleveland? Was it Cleveland? Maybe Baltimore back in the day, where they had fights.
They got rough.
Right.
They got really nasty.
And I remember one. I'm sure it was Baltimore during Frank's, and he it was funny how he would tell us publicly that we don't condone this kind of stuff. And privately, he wanted to see his team stand up to the Ravens.
You want to see some fire from your guys.
He wanted to see his guys take a punch and stand there. So there's value to all of that. And again, training camp has gotten to be such a condensed time. They're probably up in Westfield barely a month,
right?
Maybe 19 days of on-field stuff. So it's valuable. And if they can work something out with the Bengals, I think they'll have 3 weeks of joint work.
Once again, we'll take one more look at that. So 2 joint practice sessions that we know about right now be with the Ravens before their August 7th road playoff or a preseason game, and then the Packers before their August 16th game, and that one would be at Lucas Oil Stadium.
Well, the preseason game, yes.
The game will be.
The joint
practice will be at Grand Park.
Right.
Up in Westfield, where they've been for like 6 seasons now.
It's amazing. And it's such a grech place. It's just, I wish they could move Grand Park to like the South Side, because
back in our neighborhood.
It's such a bad drive, and if the team's listening, if you can do the practices in the morning to where I can get at that exit on 465 and 31 North at like 9:00, because the traffic's different.
Yeah, it is different.
But no, it's a great complex. It's football, lacrosse, and soccer, and baseball. It's a fabulous facility.
Just for reference, Mike and I both live on the southeast side. Mike's a Beach Grove.
God's country.
And I'm in the no man's land between Southport and Beach Grove, known as Franklin Township. So not too far away, actually. So that'll wrap it up, I think, for this edition of the Colts Blue Zone podcast. Hopefully, Dave will be able to join us next week. Although, if the Pacers are in the finals, maybe he won't be here, and that wouldn't be such an entirely bad
Right.
reason for him
That would be
to
good.
be absent.
We could deal with that, and we'll soldier on.
But thanks for watching us on Fox 59 Now, YouTube, and listening through your dedicated podcast device for the Colts Blue Zone podcast. I'm Matt Adams for Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths as well. Thanks for listening.